The cries of an auctioneer rang out across the dusty thoroughfare of Deeming, New Mexico, in the sweltering heat of August 1878, drawing curious onlookers to the spectacle taking place on the courthouse steps. Olivia Newcomb stood with her head bowed, shame burning her cheeks as red as the setting sun behind the distant mountains. At 26, the young widow never imagined she'd find herself being sold to cover her late husband's debts, her freedom hanging in the balance as men called out numbers that would determine her fate. Zachary Lockhart leaned against a hitching post across the street, his weathered hat pulled low over his eyes, watching the proceedings with a tightening jaw. The 30-year-old rancher had ridden into town for supplies, not to witness a woman being auctioned like cattle. His fingers absently stroked the stubble on his chin as his mind calculated the money in his saddlebags against the rising bids. $200. Do I hear $250 for the widow Newcomb's debt service? The auctioneer called, his voice carrying across the crowd. Remember, gentlemen, you'll be purchasing 6 months of her labor to settle the outstanding debts of her late husband. Olivia kept her eyes fixed on the wooden planks beneath her feet, refusing to meet the gazes of the men bidding on her future. Her husband Thomas had been dead less than 3 months, victim of a stagecoach robbery gone wrong, leaving her with a mountain of debt she hadn't known existed. The bank had seized their small homestead, and now her very freedom was being sold to the highest bidder. $250 from Mr. Reynolds. The owner of the Silver Spur Saloon offers $250. Do I hear $300? Olivia shuddered, knowing exactly what kind of labor Reynolds would expect from her. She clutched the simple gold band on her finger, twisting it anxiously. $300, a voice called out, followed by snickers from the crowd. $350, shouted another. Zachary straightened, a slow fury building in his chest. He'd heard stories of such auctions in other territories, but had never witnessed one himself. The territorial governor had recently outlawed the practice, but in remote towns like Deeming, old ways died hard. $500, a smooth voice called, and the crowd parted to reveal Clayton Wells, owner of the largest cattle operation in the county. His thin mustache twitched with a smile that didn't reach his eyes as he stared at Olivia. "And I'm prepared to go much higher." A murmur rippled through the crowd. $500 was more than most men made in 6 months. Olivia's shoulders slumped further, knowing Wells' reputation for cruelty toward his workers. Zachary pushed off from the hitching post and strode across the street, dust swirling around his boots. His hand settled on the 6-shooter at his hip, not as a threat but from habit, as he approached the edge of the gathered crowd. $700, Zachary called out, his voice clear and steady. All heads turned toward the tall cowboy. His clothes were worn but clean, his stance confident without being arrogant. Olivia lifted her gaze for the first time, taking in the stranger with curious, desperate eyes. $700 from the gentleman in the buckskin jacket, the auctioneer announced with renewed enthusiasm. Do I hear $800? Wells turned slowly, sizing up Zachary with cold calculation. $800, he countered. Zachary didn't hesitate. $1,000. The crowd gasped. Even the auctioneer seemed taken aback. $1,000 for 6 months of the widow's service. Are you certain, sir? I am, Zachary replied, his eyes never leaving Olivia's face. Wells' expression darkened. $1,200. $1,500, Zachary countered immediately. Wells' jaw clenched. $2,000. The crowd fell completely silent now. Such a sum was unheard of. Zachary reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a leather pouch. $3,000, he said, his voice carrying across the hushed gathering. In gold. Right here, right now. The auctioneer's eyes widened. $3,000, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Wells, do I hear a higher bid? Wells stared hard at Zachary, calculating. Something in the cowboy's steady gaze must have given him pause, because after a tense moment, he turned on his heel. "She's not worth that much trouble," he muttered loud enough for nearby ears to hear, stalking away through the parting crowd. 3,000 going once, going twice. Sold. To the gentleman in the buckskin jacket. The auctioneer's gavel struck with finality, and Olivia felt her legs weaken beneath her. What had she just been sold into? The stranger approached, and she fought the urge to flee. Knowing there was nowhere to run, Zachary climbed the steps, counting out the gold coins to the county clerk who'd been overseeing the auction. Once the transaction was complete, he turned to Olivia, who stood trembling despite her efforts to appear composed. "Mrs. Newcomb," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "My name is Zachary Lockhart. I have a ranch about 15 miles east of town." "Mr. Lockhart," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I suppose I should. Thank you for outbidding Mr. Wells." "Don't thank me yet," he replied, removing his hat. "I'd like to speak with you privately, if I may." The clerk handed Zachary a document, which he folded and tucked into his jacket pocket without reading. He gestured toward a nearby cafe, and Olivia nodded stiffly, aware of the many eyes following them as they descended the courthouse steps. The cafe was mercifully cool after the blazing heat outside. Zachary selected a table near the back, away from the windows and curious gazes. He ordered coffee for them both from a waitress who couldn't hide her interest in the pair. When they were alone, Olivia folded her hands in her lap to stop them from shaking. "What kind of work will you be requiring of me, Mr. Lockhart?" she asked directly, lifting her chin. Zachary studied her for a moment. Her honey-brown hair was pulled back in a simple bun, her dress faded but clean. There was a quiet dignity in how she held herself despite her circumstances. "None, Mrs. Newcomb," he said finally. "I have no intention of holding you to this contract." Confusion flashed across her face. "I don't understand." Zachary reached into his pocket and pulled out the folded document, placing it on the table between them. "This paper says I've purchased 6 months of your labor to settle your husband's debts. I'm giving you your freedom, no strings attached." Olivia stared at him in disbelief. "But $3,000 is a small price to pay to right an injustice," he finished for her. "What happened today shouldn't have happened at all. You're not responsible for your husband's debts in that manner." "The law says otherwise," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears she refused to shed. "Some laws deserve to be broken." He pushed the document toward her. "Take this. It's proof the debt is settled. You're free to go wherever you wish." The waitress returned with their coffee, eyeing them curiously before departing again. Olivia wrapped her fingers around the warm cup, but didn't drink. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" she asked, searching his face for some hidden motive. Zachary took a sip of his coffee before answering. "My mother was widowed when I was 10. A banker in Missouri tried to pull something similar. A neighbor intervened." He shrugged. "I suppose I'm returning the favor to the world. I have nowhere to go," Olivia admitted after a long silence. "The bank took our homestead. All my possessions fit in one carpetbag at the boarding house, and I can't afford another night there." Zachary considered this. "I have a proposition then, not an obligation," he added quickly. "My ranch needs help. I've been looking to hire a housekeeper for some time. It would be honest work with fair pay, your own quarters, and you'd be free to leave whenever you choose." Olivia studied him, trying to determine if there was more to his offer than he was saying. Just housekeeping," he confirmed. "Though if you can cook better than me, which wouldn't be difficult, that would be a blessing. I've been burning more meals than I care to admit. A small smile tugged at her lips despite herself. I'm a fair cook. Then you're already overqualified. He returned her smile, then grew serious. You should know that if you accept, people will talk. They'll assume things about our arrangement regardless of the truth. People are already talking, Mr. Lockhart. At least this way I'll have a roof over my head. She straightened her shoulders. I accept your offer on one condition. Name it. That you'll give me your word as a gentleman that you truly expect nothing beyond housekeeping and cooking. Zachary placed his hand over his heart. You have my word, Mrs. Newcomb. Your virtue is safe with me. For the first time that day, Olivia felt a small measure of hope. Then I accept. Good. He finished his coffee. Do you need to collect your things from the boarding house? She nodded. Just one bag. I can be ready to leave within the hour. Take your time. I have supplies to purchase before we head back to the ranch. I'll meet you at the general store when you're ready. They rose, and Zachary placed coins on the table for their coffee. As they stepped back onto the street, he noticed several townspeople watching them with undisguised interest. Ignore them, he said quietly. Their opinions don't matter. Olivia nodded, though the weight of their stares made her shoulders tense. As they parted ways at the cafe door, she turned back. Mr. Lockhart, thank you, truly. He touched the brim of his hat. You're welcome, Mrs. Newcomb. An hour later, Olivia approached the general store, her carpetbag in hand. True to his word, Zachary was waiting with his wagon loaded with supplies. He took her bag and helped her onto the seat before climbing up beside her and taking the reins. As they pulled away from Deeming, Olivia couldn't help but look back at the town that had been her home for the past 3 years. She felt a strange mixture of loss and liberation as the buildings receded in the distance. Have you lived in these parts long, Mr. Lockhart? She asked, breaking the silence that had settled between them. About 5 years now, he replied, keeping his eyes on the trail ahead. Came out from Texas after the war looking for a fresh start. And did you find it? A smile touched his lips. I believe I did. The land's been good to me, even when it's harsh. They fell into conversation as the wagon rumbled eastward, the sun beginning its descent toward the horizon. Zachary told her about his ranch, the 50 head of cattle he managed, his 2 ranch hands who lived in a bunkhouse near the main house, and his prized quarter-horse stallion, Thunder. In turn, Olivia shared small details about herself, how she'd come west with Thomas 4 years ago from Pennsylvania, how they'd struggled to make the homestead profitable, how she'd never quite adjusted to the relentless New Mexico heat. It's cooler at the ranch, Zachary assured her. We're a bit higher in elevation and there's a creek that runs nearby, makes all the difference in summer. As the wagon crested a rise, Zachary pointed ahead. There it is, Lockhart Ranch. Olivia leaned forward, taking in the sight. Nestled in a small valley with mountains rising behind it, the ranch was more impressive than she'd expected. The main house was a substantial 2-story structure built of timber and stone, with a wide porch wrapping around the front. A large barn stood nearby, along with several outbuildings, all well maintained. A corral held several horses, and in the distance, she could see cattle grazing on the grassy slopes. It's beautiful, she said with genuine appreciation. It's home, Zachary replied simply, but she could hear the pride in his voice. As they approached, 2 men emerged from the barn. Zachary raised his hand in greeting and they hurried over to help with the wagon. Mrs. Newcomb, these are my ranch hands, Frank Dawson and Miguel Ortiz. Gentlemen, this is Mrs. Olivia Newcomb. She'll be taking over as our housekeeper. The men tipped their hats respectfully, though Olivia didn't miss the curious glances they exchanged. Welcome to Lockhart Ranch, madam, Frank said, a weathered man in his 50s with kind eyes. "We are glad to have you here," Miguel added with a slight accent. He was younger, perhaps in his 30s, with a friendly smile. "Thank you both," Olivia replied. "I look forward to improving the meals around here from what Mr. Lockhart tells me." This brought chuckles from the men. "Boss ain't exaggerating about his cooking, madam," Frank said. "We've been taking turns, but none of us has much talent for it." Zachary helped Olivia down from the wagon. "Frank, Miguel, could you unload the supplies? I'll show Mrs. Newcomb to her quarters." The men nodded and began unloading, while Zachary led Olivia toward the main house, carrying her carpet bag. The porch steps creaked slightly underfoot as they climbed them, and Zachary pushed open the heavy wooden front door. The interior was surprisingly well appointed for a bachelor's home. The main room had a large stone fireplace, comfortable-looking furniture, and bookshelves filled with volumes. A dining table that could seat 8 stood to one side, and a door led to what Olivia presumed was the kitchen. "It's lovely," she said, genuinely surprised. "My mother's influence," Zachary explained, seeming to read her thoughts. "She taught me that a home should be comfortable, not just functional." He gestured to a staircase. "Your room is upstairs, first door on the right. It has its own small sitting area and plenty of storage. The washroom is at the end of the hall. We have running water pumped from the well." Olivia followed him up the stairs, impressed by the modern convenience. Many homes in Deeming, including the one she'd shared with Thomas, didn't have such luxuries. The bedroom was spacious and airy, with a large window overlooking the valley. A 4-poster bed with a quilt, a wardrobe, a dressing table with mirror, and a small writing desk furnished the space. A doorway led to a small sitting room with a comfortable chair and another window. "This is far more than I expected," Olivia said, setting her carpet bag on the bed. "It was my mother's room when she visited," Zachary explained, standing in the doorway. "I've kept it ready for guests, though we don't get many out this way. It's perfect, thank you. I'll give you some time to settle in. Dinner's usually around 7, but given the day you've had, we can make it later if you prefer." 7 is fine. I'd like to earn my keep starting right away." Zachary nodded. "The kitchen is fully stocked with what I brought today, plus what was already there. Make yourself at home." He turned to leave, then paused. "Mrs. Newcomb, I meant what I said in town. You're not a servant here, but an employee. Your time is your own when your work is done." With that, he left her to unpack, closing the door softly behind him. Alone for the first time since the auction, Olivia sank onto the bed, emotion finally overwhelming her. Tears came in a flood, tears of relief, exhaustion, and lingering fear. She allowed herself this moment of weakness, then wiped her eyes resolutely. She had been given a second chance, and she wouldn't waste it feeling sorry for herself. She unpacked her meager belongings, 3 dresses besides the one she wore, undergarments, a nightgown, a hairbrush, a small box containing her mother's cameo brooch, and a daguerreotype of her parents. Everything she owned in the world fit into half of one drawer in the massive wardrobe. After washing her face and tidying her hair, she made her way downstairs to explore the kitchen. It was well equipped and surprisingly clean, with a large cast iron stove, ample counter space, and a pantry stocked with staples. The new supplies Zachary had purchased were being brought in by Miguel, who nodded respectfully before leaving her to organize things as she saw fit. By 7 o'clock, Olivia had prepared a hearty meal of beef stew, fresh bread, and apple pie using the supplies at hand. The men washed up outside before entering, and their appreciative expressions when they smelled the food made her smile. "This looks amazing, Mrs. Newcomb," Zachary said as they sat around the table. "Been a long while since we had proper food," Frank added, eyeing the pie with particular interest. The meal passed with easy conversation, the men telling stories about ranch life that often had them all laughing. Olivia found herself relaxing for the first time in months. There was no mention of the auction, for which she was grateful. After dinner, the men insisted on cleaning up, claiming it was only fair since she'd cooked. Zachary showed her the rest of the house, explaining the daily routine and her responsibilities. It was all very proper and businesslike, but there was a kindness in his manner that put her at ease. That night, lying in the comfortable bed in her new room, Olivia stared at the ceiling, thinking about the extraordinary turn her life had taken in a single day. From the depths of humiliation to a safe haven, all because of a stranger's inexplicable generosity. As she drifted toward sleep, she realized she still didn't fully understand why Zachary Lockhart had spent such a fortune to free her, but she was profoundly grateful that he had. In the weeks that followed, Olivia settled into life at Lockhart Ranch. Her days fell into a comfortable rhythm, preparing meals, keeping the house in order, and occasionally helping with lighter outdoor chores when she finished her other tasks early. The men were always respectful, and true to his word, Zachary never made any inappropriate advances or demands. September brought cooler temperatures and changing colors to the landscape. Olivia found herself enjoying the peace of ranch life, away from the judgmental stares of townspeople. Each Saturday, Zachary gave her her wages, far more than she'd expected, which she carefully saved. Though he'd given her her freedom, she was determined to repay his kindness someday. One crisp morning in early October, Olivia was hanging laundry on the line behind the house when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Shielding her eyes against the sun, she saw Zachary riding in from the eastern pasture at a gallop, something unusual for the typically measured cowboy. He dismounted before his horse had fully stopped, his expression grave. "Mrs. Newcomb," he called, striding toward her, "we've got trouble coming. I need you to go inside and stay there." "What kind of trouble?" she asked, anxiety rising in her chest. "Clayton Wells and some of his men. They're headed this way, and they don't look to be making a social call." He glanced toward the barn where Frank and Miguel were working. "Frank, Miguel." "Riders coming." The men emerged quickly, reading the urgency in their boss's voice. "How many?" Frank asked, already moving toward the rifle rack in the barn. "5, including Wells," Zachary replied, turning back to Olivia. "Please go inside now, Mrs. Newcomb." She nodded, gathering her laundry basket and hurrying toward the house. From the window of the front room, she watched as Zachary and his men positioned themselves on the porch and near the corral, rifles in hand but not raised. The riders approached slowly now, 5 men with Wells in the lead. Even from a distance, Olivia could see the cold determination on his face. The men reined in about 20 yards from the house, spreading out in a line. "Lockhart," Wells called out, "I've come to discuss some business." "State your business from there, Wells," Zachary replied, his voice carrying across the yard. Wells smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I've been thinking about our transaction in town last month. Seems to me you overpaid considerably for the widow's services. I'm prepared to take her off your hands, say $4,000 for your trouble." Olivia's hand flew to her throat. He was trying to buy her. After all this time, "Mrs. Newcomb isn't for sale." Zachary's voice was steel. "She's a free woman employed at this ranch. I suggest you move on." Wells laughed, a harsh sound. "Come now, Lockhart. Word around town is you haven't even bedded her. What kind of man pays $3,000 for a woman and doesn't take his pleasure?" "The kind who respects women as people, not property," Zachary answered evenly. "This conversation is over, Wells. Turn around and leave my land." Wells' smile vanished. "I don't think you understand the situation, Lockhart. I want the woman and I intend to have her, 5,000 my final offer. There is no offer to consider. Zachary stepped forward, his rifle still pointed at the ground but ready. Mrs. Newcomb makes her own decisions about where she lives and works. Now get off my property before this gets ugly. The tension crackled in the air as the men stared each other down. Finally, Wells jerked his head to his men. Spread out. The four men with Wells moved their horses into a wider formation, hands hovering near their holsters. Frank and Miguel shifted positions as well, rifles now raised. You're outnumbered, Lockhart, Wells called. Be reasonable. Last warning, Wells, Zachary replied, raising his own rifle now. Leave. Now. For a terrible moment, Olivia thought gunfire would erupt at any second. Then, surprisingly, Wells relaxed in his saddle. Another day, then, he said, his voice carrying a clear threat. But this isn't over. That woman belongs at my ranch, and one way or another she'll end up there. He jerked his reins, turning his horse. Let's go, boys. Mr. Lockhart needs time to reconsider my generous offer. The riders turned and rode away, dust rising behind them. Olivia watched until they disappeared from view before sinking into a nearby chair, her legs suddenly weak. Minutes later, Zachary entered the house, his expression still tense. Are you all right? He asked, setting his rifle aside. Yes, she managed, though her voice trembled slightly. What do you think he'll do? Zachary ran a hand through his hair. I'm not sure. Wells isn't used to being refused anything he wants, but don't worry, we won't let him near you. This is my fault, she whispered. I've brought trouble to your door. No, Zachary said firmly, taking the seat across from her. Wells is the problem, not you. The man thinks his money entitles him to whatever and whoever he wants. What if he comes back with more men? Then we'll be ready. He leaned forward, meeting her eyes directly. I promised you safety here, Mrs. Newcomb, and I intend to keep that promise. The sincerity in his gaze calmed her somewhat. Thank you, Mr. Lockhart. He nodded, then rose. I need to speak with Frank and Miguel about increasing patrols for a while. We'll take precautions, but I don't want you to live in fear. This is still your home for as long as you wish it to be. As he left, Olivia reflected on his words. Home. Somehow, in the weeks she'd been here, Lockhart Ranch had indeed begun to feel like home in a way her homestead with Thomas never had. And the man who owned it was becoming increasingly important to her in ways she wasn't yet ready to examine too closely. That evening after dinner, Olivia sat on the front porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in hues of gold and pink. The air was cool but not cold, fragrant with sage and pine. Zachary joined her after a time, offering her a cup of coffee which she accepted with a smile. It's peaceful tonight, she observed. Hard to believe there was such ugliness earlier. That's the way of the West, Zachary replied, settling into the chair beside hers. Beauty and brutality often side by side. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the colors fade from the sky. May I ask you something personal, Mr. Lockhart? Olivia ventured finally. Of course. Why did you never marry? You have this beautiful home, this land. It seems like you've built a life meant for a family. He considered the question, taking a sip of his coffee. I suppose I was waiting for the right woman, he said at last. I've had opportunities, but none of them felt right. He glanced at her. What about you and your husband? How did you meet? Thomas was a friend of my father's, she said, her eyes on the distant horizon. After my parents died of influenza, he offered marriage as a way to secure my future. He was kind and I was grateful. She paused. It wasn't a love match, but we were companions. I'm sorry for your loss, Zachary said quietly. Thank you. The hardest part was discovering after his death how much debt he'd accumulated. He kept it from me, I think to spare me worry. She shook her head. I wish he'd trusted me enough to share the burden. Some men think they are protecting women by keeping troubles to themselves, Zachary observed. It's misguided but well-intentioned. What about you, Mr. Lockhart? Do you believe in sharing burdens? His eyes met hers. I believe in honesty between people who care for one another. Burdens shared are burdens halved. Something shifted between them in that moment, a subtle but unmistakable change in the air. Olivia looked away first, suddenly aware of the quickening of her pulse. It's getting chilly, she said, rising from her chair. I should go in. Zachary stood as well. Of course. Good night, Mrs. Newcomb. Good night, Mr. Lockhart. As October gave way to November, the threat from Wells seemed to recede. There had been no further visits, though Zachary maintained increased vigilance. The ranch prepared for winter, with cattle brought in from the high pastures and supplies stocked against potential storms. Olivia found herself growing closer to Zachary, their conversations extending beyond the practicalities of running the household. They discovered shared interests in books and music, and sometimes in the evenings, Zachary would read aloud while she worked on mending or knitting by the fire. One evening, as the first snow of the season fell gently outside, Zachary surprised her by revealing a piano in a room she'd thought was used for storage. It was my mother's, he explained, removing the protective cover. I keep it tuned, though I can't play myself. May I? Olivia asked, fingers hovering above the keys. Please. She sat on the bench and began to play, a gentle melody that filled the room with warmth. Zachary leaned against the wall, watching her with undisguised admiration. You never mentioned you were a musician, he said when she finished. It's been so long I wasn't sure I remembered how, she admitted. My mother taught me as a girl. You play beautifully. She smiled at the compliment. Perhaps I could teach you sometime. I'd like that, he replied, and the way he looked at her made her heart flutter. As November progressed, Olivia began preparations for Thanksgiving, planning a feast that would include not only the ranch household, but also several neighboring ranchers and their families. It would be the first large gathering she'd hosted at Lockhart Ranch, and she was determined it would be perfect. 3 days before Thanksgiving, Zachary rode into town for final supplies. He returned later than expected, his expression troubled as he entered the kitchen where Olivia was preparing bread dough. What's wrong? She asked immediately, wiping flour from her hands. Wells was in town, he said, removing his hat and coat. He's been spreading rumors. Olivia's stomach tightened. What kind of rumors? Zachary hesitated, then sighed. That you're not just my housekeeper that I purchased you for. Other reasons. She flushed, anger rising, and people believe him. Some do. Small towns thrive on gossip. He raked a hand through his hair. I'm sorry, Olivia. I knew this might happen, but I didn't think Wells would be so persistent. It was the first time he'd used her given name, and despite the circumstances, she found she liked the sound of it on his lips. What does it matter what people think? She asked, resuming her kneading with perhaps more vigor than necessary. We know the truth. It matters because your reputation, my reputation, was in tatters the moment I stood on those auction steps, she interrupted, meeting his gaze squarely. I've made peace with that. He studied her face. You've changed since you first came here, for the better, I hope. Definitely for the better, he affirmed with a small smile. You're stronger than you realize, Olivia Newcomb. The way he looked at her made her breath catch. For a moment she thought he might step closer, might take her flour-covered hands in his. Instead, he cleared his throat. I should go help Frank and Miguel with the horses. The guests will start arriving tomorrow. She nodded, ignoring the disappointment that flickered through her. Dinner will be ready at 7. Thanksgiving Day dawned clear and cold, the landscape transformed by a fresh dusting of snow that sparkled in the morning sunlight. The house was filled with delicious aromas as Olivia put the finishing touches on the feast she'd been preparing for days. Guests began arriving by mid-afternoon, 3 neighboring ranching families, the town doctor and his wife, and the local preacher. Olivia greeted them alongside Zachary, conscious of the curious glances some cast her way, but determined to hold her head high. The meal was a resounding success, with conversation flowing as freely as the wine and laughter ringing through the usually quiet house. Olivia found herself genuinely enjoying the company, especially that of Sarah Johnson, wife of a neighboring rancher, who treated her with immediate warmth. "Zachary tells me you're from Pennsylvania originally," Sarah said as they prepared coffee and dessert in the kitchen. "Do you miss it?" Olivia considered the question. "I miss certain things, the changing seasons, the lushness of the forests, but I've grown to love the openness of the West. There's a freedom here that I never experienced back east." Sarah smiled knowingly. "And has our bachelor rancher contributed to your appreciation of Western life?" Olivia busied herself with the coffee pot, hoping her blush wasn't too obvious. "Mr. Lockhart has been very kind." "Kind isn't the word I'd use to describe the way he looks at you," Sarah observed with a chuckle. "I've known Zach for 5 years, and I've never seen him so attentive to anyone." Before Olivia could formulate a response, they were joined by Zachary himself, carrying empty plates from the dining room. "The unanimous verdict is that was the finest Thanksgiving meal anyone's had in years," he announced. "Mrs. Johnson, your husband has requested a second helping of pie." "That man's stomach is bottomless," Sarah laughed, taking the pie plate. She gave Olivia a meaningful glance before returning to the dining room, leaving them alone. "Everything really was wonderful," Zachary said, stepping closer to help Olivia with the coffee tray. "You've made this house come alive again." Their fingers brushed as they both reached for the same cup, and neither pulled away immediately. The touch, simple as it was, sent warmth coursing through Olivia's veins. "I should thank you," she said softly, "for giving me the chance to rebuild my life." His eyes held hers. "You've done more than rebuild, Olivia. You've flourished." The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken feelings. Then voices from the dining room broke the spell, and they returned to their guests, the coffee tray between them like a shield against emotions growing too powerful to contain. Late that evening, after the last guests had departed and the house was quiet again, Olivia stood on the front porch, wrapped in a shawl against the cold. The sky was clear, stars blazing against the blackness, more stars than she'd ever seen back east. The door opened behind her and Zachary emerged, carrying a blanket which he draped around her shoulders. "You'll catch your death out here," he said, but there was tenderness in his voice. "It's too beautiful to go inside just yet," she replied. "Look at those stars." He stood beside her, following her gaze upward. "They're magnificent tonight. Thank you for today," she said after a comfortable silence, "for including me as more than just your housekeeper." He turned to face her, his expression serious in the moonlight. "You've never been just my housekeeper, Olivia." The way he said her name like it was something precious made her heart race. "What have I been then?" she asked, barely above a whisper. He took a step closer. "At first, someone I wanted to help, then someone I respected, and now—" He hesitated, searching her face. "Now you're someone I can't imagine my life without." Olivia's breath caught. "Zachary, I know it's been less than 3 months," he continued, taking her hand gently. "I know you're still healing from loss. I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give, but I needed you to know how I feel." She looked down at their joined hands, then back up to his face. "I've been afraid to admit, even to myself, how important you've become to me," she confessed. "After Thomas, after the auction." I never thought I could feel this way again." "And what way is that?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. Instead of answering with words, Olivia rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but when his arms encircled her, pulling her closer, it deepened into something that made her knees weak. When they finally parted, both breathless, Zachary rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that for weeks," he murmured. "What took you so long?" she asked, smiling against his lips. "I was afraid you'd think I was like Wells, that I'd helped you only to claim you for myself." She pulled back slightly to look into his eyes. "You are nothing like that man. You gave me freedom and asked for nothing in return. That's how I knew I could trust you with my heart." He kissed her again, and in that moment, with the stars blazing overhead and the promise of snow in the air, Olivia knew she had found not just safety but love at Lockhart Ranch. As winter settled over the land, Olivia and Zachary's relationship blossomed. They were discreet at first, mindful of propriety despite the isolation of the ranch. Frank and Miguel pretended not to notice the lingering glances and brushing hands, though Olivia sometimes caught their knowing smiles. December brought heavier snows, transforming the landscape into a glistening wonderland. Christmas preparations occupied much of Olivia's time, as she was determined to make the holiday special. She decorated the house with evergreen boughs and red ribbons, baked cookies and fruitcake, and secretly worked on gifts for Zachary and the ranch hands. On Christmas Eve, after a festive dinner where even the usually reserved Miguel told jokes, Zachary asked Olivia to join him for a walk despite the cold. "I have something I want to show you," he explained, helping her into her coat. They trudged through the snow toward a stand of pines not far from the house, their breath forming clouds in the crisp air. The moon was nearly full, casting silver light across the unblemished white landscape. "It's magical," Olivia said, gazing around in wonder. "Like a fairy tale." Zachary smiled, leading her deeper into the pines. "Wait until you see this." They emerged into a small clearing where a frozen stream wound through the trees. Zachary had strung lanterns from the lower branches, their golden light reflecting off the ice and snow in a dazzling display. "Zachary," she breathed, "it's beautiful." He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Not as beautiful as you." He looked nervous suddenly, and Olivia felt her heart begin to race. "Olivia," he began, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. "I know this may seem fast, but when you know something is right, sometimes you just have to trust that feeling." He took a deep breath. "These past months with you have been the happiest of my life. You've brought warmth and joy into my home and my heart." He released one of her hands to reach into his pocket, withdrawing a small box. Dropping to one knee in the snow, he opened it to reveal a gold ring set with a single diamond that sparkled in the lantern light. "Olivia Newcomb, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Tears filled her eyes, blurring the beautiful scene around them. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Zachary Lockhart, I will marry you." His face broke into a smile of such pure joy that it took her breath away. He slid the ring onto her finger, then stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that melted the winter chill. When they finally parted, Olivia laughed, a sound of pure happiness. "I can't believe this is happening. Are you certain?" "People will talk, let them talk," he interrupted, cupping her face in his hands. "I love you, Olivia. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Everything else is just noise." "I love you too," she said, the words feeling like a liberation. "More than I thought possible." They stood in the glowing clearing, holding each other close as snowflakes began to fall gently around them, each one a promise of the future they would build together. The news of their engagement spread quickly. met with genuine joy from Frank and Miguel, warm congratulations from neighbors like the Johnsons, and predictable gossip from others. Olivia found she cared less about the latter than she might have once. Zachary's love gave her a confidence she'd never known. They set the wedding date for April, when spring would bring new life to the land. In the meantime, Olivia's role at the ranch shifted subtly from employee to partner. Zachary sought her input on decisions, taught her about cattle ranching, and included her in discussions about future plans for the property. January passed in a blur of winter storms and cozy evenings by the fire. February brought hints of spring longer days, occasional thaws, the first birdsong after months of silence. By March, Olivia's wedding dress hung completed in her wardrobe, sewn with help from Sarah Johnson during afternoon visits. They had almost forgotten about Clayton Wells when he reappeared one blustery day in late March. Zachary was in town on business while Olivia remained at the ranch, putting the finishing touches on a quilt intended as a wedding gift for her soon-to-be husband. The sound of approaching horses drew her to the window. Her blood ran cold at the sight of Wells and 3 of his men riding into the yard. Frank was out checking on newborn calves, and Miguel had gone with Zachary to town. She was alone for a moment. Panic threatened to overwhelm her. Then she remembered Zachary's words from months ago. "You're stronger than you realize." Straightening her shoulders, she went to the gun cabinet, removed a shotgun, and loaded it as Zachary had taught her. By the time Wells knocked on the door, she was ready. "Mrs. Newcomb," he called, "I know you're in there. I just want to talk." She positioned herself to the side of the door, shotgun ready. "Say what you have to say from out there, Mr. Wells." There was a pause, then a chuckle. "Feisty as ever, I see. I've come to offer my congratulations on your upcoming nuptials. Word travels fast in these parts." "Thank you. Now please leave." "Not so fast," he continued, his voice hardening. "I also came to warn you. Lockhart isn't what he seems. Did he tell you where that $3,000 came from? The money he used to save you." Despite herself, Olivia felt a flicker of doubt. "That's none of my concern." "It should be," Wells pressed. "Especially since it came from selling off land that wasn't rightfully his land with water rights that affected neighboring properties." "My property." "You're lying," Olivia said firmly, though her grip on the shotgun tightened. "Am I? Ask him about the northeast section, about the dispute over Pine Creek. Ask him where he really got that kind of money on such short notice." The front door suddenly burst open and Olivia swung the shotgun around, her finger tense on the trigger. Zachary stood in the doorway, his expression thunderous, Miguel just behind him. "Get off my property, Wells," he growled. "Now." Wells smirked, unperturbed. "Just having a friendly conversation with your fiancé, Lockhart, clearing up some misconceptions. Any business between us doesn't involve Mrs. Newcomb," Zachary said, stepping protectively in front of Olivia though she still held the shotgun. "Doesn't it?" Wells countered. "Since your impulsive bid at that auction seems to be the foundation of your relationship, I thought she might want to know the truth about the money that bought her." Olivia saw Zachary's jaw tighten. "Nothing you say will come between us, Wells. Your games won't work." Wells shrugged, turning to leave. "We'll see about that. Good day, Mrs. Newcomb. Think about what I said." The men mounted their horses and rode away, leaving an uncomfortable silence in their wake. Zachary gently took the shotgun from Olivia's hands and set it aside. "Are you all right?" he asked, concern etched on his face. "I'm fine," she assured him, though her mind was racing. "Zachary, what was he talking about? The northeast section, water rights?" Zachary sighed heavily. "Let's sit down. There are some things I should have told you sooner." They moved to the sitting room, Miguel discreetly withdrawing to give them privacy. Zachary paced for a moment before taking a seat across from Olivia. "When I first established this ranch," he began, "I purchased land from several different owners. One parcel included water rights to Pine Creek, which also serves Wells' property downstream. There was a dispute over the boundary lines and the extent of those rights. And," Olivia prompted when he paused, "and I won the legal battle, but it created bad blood between us. Wells believes I cheated him, though everything was done according to the law." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "When I needed money quickly for the auction, I sold a portion of that disputed land to another neighbor, not the water rights, just grazing land. Wells sees it as me profiting from what he considers stolen property." "Why didn't you tell me this before?" Zachary ran a hand through his hair. "At first, it didn't seem relevant. Later, I was afraid it might change how you saw me, that you might believe I was somehow as unscrupulous as Wells." Olivia was quiet for a moment, processing this information. "Is there anything else I should know about your history with Wells?" "Just that his grudge against me goes deeper than you. He's wanted this ranch for years, and my success grates on him." Zachary moved to kneel before her, taking her hands. "Olivia, I swear to you, everything I did was legal and honest. I'm not proud of the feud, but I won't apologize for protecting what's rightfully mine." She studied his face, the earnest concern in his eyes, the tension in his jaw. "I believe you," she said finally. "But no more secrets, Zachary. If we're to be partners in life, I need to know everything good and bad." Relief washed over his features. "No more secrets," he agreed, pressing a kiss to her palm. "I promise." As he pulled her into an embrace, Olivia felt the last of her doubts dissolve. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The weeks leading up to the wedding passed without further incident. Wells seemed to have abandoned his attempts to cause trouble, and spring brought a renewed sense of optimism to the ranch. Calves were born, wildflowers bloomed across the pastures, and preparations for the ceremony continued. The wedding day dawned clear and mild, the kind of perfect spring morning that seemed designed for new beginnings. Olivia prepared in her room, assisted by Sarah Johnson, who had become a dear friend. "You look radiant," Sarah said, adjusting the simple veil over Olivia's upswept hair. The wedding dress was elegant, but understated ivory satin with lace accents, designed to suit a second marriage while still honoring the significance of the day. "I feel like I'm dreaming," Olivia admitted, smoothing the fabric nervously. "A year ago, I was a grief-stricken widow facing an uncertain future. Now I'm marrying a man I love more than I thought possible. Life has a way of surprising us," Sarah smiled, handing Olivia the bouquet of wildflowers and roses they'd gathered that morning. "Zachary is a lucky man." "I'm the lucky one," Olivia replied, but her friend shook her head. "You both deserve this happiness. Now, are you ready? There's a very anxious groom waiting downstairs." They'd chosen to hold the ceremony on the ranch in the clearing where Zachary had proposed. Now decorated with ribbons and flowers, with benches brought in for the guests, it was transformed into a woodland cathedral. The local preacher stood ready, and Zachary waited at the front, Frank and Miguel beside him, as Olivia approached on the arm of Dr. Johnson, Sarah's husband who had offered to give her away. The small gathering of friends and neighbors rose. But Olivia saw only Zachary, handsome in his new suit, his eyes filled with love as they fixed on her. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promises of love, fidelity, and partnership that brought tears to more than one eye among the guests. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Zachary's kiss was tender yet passionate, a perfect balance that seemed to embody their relationship. The celebration afterward lasted well into the evening, with music, dancing, and laughter filling the ranch house. As the stars began to appear, the newlyweds slipped away from their guests, walking hand in hand toward the main house, which was now truly their shared home. "Happy, Mrs. Lockhart?" Zachary asked, his arm around her waist as they paused to look up at the sky. "Completely," she answered, leaning into his embrace. "It feels right, doesn't it? Like this is exactly where we're supposed to be." "It does," he agreed, turning to face her. "I never expected to find you, Olivia. When I rode into town that day, I was just going for supplies. Instead, I found the love of my life. On an auction block, no less," she said with a small laugh. "I'd have paid 10 times the amount to ensure your freedom," he said seriously, cupping her face. "Though I'm grateful every day that you chose to stay." "Where else would I go?" she whispered. "You're my home now, Zachary Lockhart." Their kiss was a seal on the day's promises, and as he swept her into his arms to carry her into the house, Olivia knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, their love stronger than any storm. The first year of their marriage passed in a sweet rhythm of work and companionship. The ranch prospered under their joint care, with Olivia proving herself not just a homemaker but a shrewd business partner. She took over the accounts, discovering a talent for numbers that helped optimize their operations. Zachary often joked that marrying her was the best business decision he'd ever made, though they both knew their bond went far deeper than pragmatic partnership. In the spring of their second year together, Olivia shared news that brought tears of joy to Zachary's eyes. They were expecting a child. The pregnancy transformed their already happy home with new excitement and preparations. "What shall we name him?" Zachary asked one evening as they sat on the porch, his hand resting gently on her growing belly. "Him," Olivia laughed. "You're so certain it's a boy." "Just a feeling," he replied with a smile, "though a daughter would be equally treasured." "If it is a boy," she said thoughtfully, "I'd like to name him James, after my father." "James Lockhart," Zachary tested the name. "Strong, dignified, I like it." "And if it's a girl, what about Eleanor, after my mother?" Olivia smiled, covering his hand with hers as the baby kicked. "Eleanor Lockhart, that's beautiful." Their son was born on a crisp autumn day, arriving with a powerful cry that immediately endeared him to his father. James Thomas Lockhart, named for both Olivia's father and her first husband, had Zachary's dark hair and Olivia's green eyes, a perfect blend of them both. Life adjusted to accommodate the new addition. Zachary proved to be a doting father, often carrying James with him around the ranch when Olivia needed rest. The baby thrived in the healthy country air, growing strong and curious about the world around him. The years rolled by, marked by the changing seasons and the milestones of their growing family. Eleanor joined them 2 years after James, a fair-haired beauty with her father's determined spirit. Then came William 3 years later, another dark-haired boy who seemed born to ride, sitting a horse before he could properly walk. Through it all, Olivia and Zachary's bond deepened, their love maturing like fine wine. There were challenges, of course, drought years when the ranch struggled, illnesses that swept through the family, and the ongoing tensions with neighbors like Wells who never quite accepted their success. Clayton Wells remained a shadow at the edges of their life, though direct confrontations had ceased. His ranch had fallen on hard times, his poor management and harsh treatment of workers finally catching up with him. Occasionally, they would hear rumors of his bitter comments about the Lockharts, but these grew less frequent as the years passed. On the 10th anniversary of their wedding, Zachary surprised Olivia with a trip to San Francisco, leaving the children in the capable care of Frank, now married himself to a widow from a neighboring town, and his wife. The city was a whirlwind of culture and luxury after the simplicity of ranch life theater performances, fine restaurants, shops filled with goods from around the world. "It's overwhelming," Olivia admitted as they strolled arm in arm along the waterfront. "Beautiful, but I find myself missing home." Zachary squeezed her hand. "I know what you mean. The city has its charms, but there's something about our land that gets in your blood." "Do you ever regret it?" she asked suddenly. "Spending that money on me all those years ago. You could have expanded the ranch earlier or invested in other ventures." He stopped walking, turning to face her with surprise. "Regret it? Olivia, that was the best investment I ever made." His expression softened as he tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Besides, I got the better end of that deal by far. $3,000 for a lifetime with you. I robbed the bank." She laughed, rising on her toes to kiss him. Even after 10 years, his touch still sent warmth spreading through her. "I love you, Zachary Lockhart. Thank you for saving me." "You saved yourself," he corrected her gently. "I just offered a hand when you needed one. Everything you've accomplished since then has been through your own strength and determination." They continued their walk, making plans for the ranch's future, discussing their hopes for their children, and simply enjoying the rare opportunity to be alone together. Upon their return to the ranch, they found an unexpected visitor waiting Clayton Wells. Age had not been kind to him. His once imposing figure had grown gaunt, his face lined with bitterness and hard living. "Lockhart," he greeted them stiffly as they dismounted from their wagon. "Mrs. Lockhart." Zachary positioned himself slightly in front of Olivia, his posture tense. "Wells, what brings you here?" The older man's shoulders sagged slightly. "I've come to make you an offer. I'm selling my ranch. Thought you might be interested in the land given our history." This was unexpected. Zachary and Olivia exchanged a glance. "Why don't you come inside?" Olivia suggested, her natural hospitality overcoming old animosities. "We can discuss this properly." Over coffee in the kitchen, with the children discreetly sent to play outside under Frank's watchful eye, Wells explained his situation. Years of poor management and excessive spending had left him deeply in debt. The bank was foreclosing, but had given him the opportunity to sell first if he could find a buyer. "It's good land," he said, a hint of his old pride showing through. "Needs work, but the water rights alone make it valuable." Zachary was quiet, studying the man who had been his adversary for so many years. "Why come to me? After everything between us, I'm surprised you'd want me to have your property." Wells laughed bitterly. "Believe me, it wasn't my first choice. But you're one of the few in these parts with the means to make a fair offer. And—" he hesitated, glancing at Olivia, "I've heard you treat your workers well. Some of my men have been with me a long time. I'd like to know they'll be taken care of." Olivia saw the surprise on her husband's face at this unexpected show of concern from a man they'd always considered heartless. "What's your asking price?" Zachary asked finally. Wells named a figure that was reasonable, perhaps even below market value. Zachary nodded thoughtfully. "I'll need to ride out and look at the property, assess its condition. But if everything is as you say, I'm interested." Relief flickered across Wells' face. "Fair enough. When can you come?" They arranged for Zachary to visit the Wells ranch the following day. As Olivia showed their guest out, Wells paused on the porch steps. "Mrs. Lockhart," he said awkwardly, "I owe you an apology. My behavior toward you over the years. It wasn't befitting a gentleman." Stunned by this unexpected contrition, Olivia took a moment to respond. "Thank you, Mr. Wells." "That's appreciated." He nodded stiffly, then descended the steps to his waiting horse. As he mounted, he added, "You built something good here, both of you, more than I managed in twice the time." They watched him ride away, both processing this strange encounter. "Do you think his apology was sincere?" Olivia asked as they returned inside. Zachary considered. "I think a man facing the loss of everything sometimes sees things more clearly, whether that clarity lasts." He shrugged. "But the offer for the land seems genuine, and it would be a good expansion for us." The purchase of the Wells property went through smoothly, doubling the size of Lockhart Ranch and securing additional water rights that would prove invaluable in dry years. Clayton Wells left the territory, heading east to live with a distant cousin, reportedly more humble than when he'd arrived in New Mexico decades earlier. As their children grew, so did the ranch's prosperity. James, now a young man of 18, showed a natural aptitude for the business side of ranching, working closely with his mother on expanding their cattle trading. Eleanor, 16 and as beautiful as her mother, had inherited Zachary's way with horses, developing a small but successful side business breeding and training quality mounts. William, 13, was still finding his path, but showed promise as a natural leader among the ranch hands. On a warm evening in their 20th year of marriage, Olivia and Zachary sat on the same porch where they had first admitted their feelings for each other. The ranch spread before them, bathed in the golden light of sunset, a testament to years of hard work and partnership. "Do you ever think about that day in Deeming?" Zachary asked, his hand finding hers as it had countless times over the years. "The auction." Olivia's voice held no bitterness now, only a hint of wonder. "Sometimes, it's strange to think how differently things might have turned out." "I was just riding through town," he mused. "If I'd been an hour earlier or later." "But you weren't," she said simply, squeezing his hand. "You were exactly where you needed to be when I needed you most." He brought her hand to his lips. "I may have helped you gain your freedom that day, Olivia, but you've liberated me in so many more ways since. From loneliness, from doubt, from a life half-lived." From inside the house came the sounds of their family, James's deep voice explaining something to William, Eleanor's laughter at some shared joke, the clatter of dishes as the evening meal was prepared. The ordinary, precious music of the life they'd built together. "We've been blessed," Olivia said softly. "More than I ever dreamed possible when I stood on those courthouse steps." Zachary nodded, drawing her closer against his side as they watched the sunset paint the land in hues of gold and crimson. "The auctioneer that day said I was purchasing 6 months of your service," he recalled with a smile. "I'd say I got the better part of that bargain by far." "As did I," Olivia replied, resting her head on his shoulder. "Freedom was only the beginning of what you gave me, Zachary Lockhart. The rest has been the adventure of a lifetime." As darkness fell over the land that had become their legacy, they remained on the porch, wrapped in the comfortable silence of two people who had faced life's challenges side by side and emerged stronger for them. From an auction block to a thriving ranch, from strangers to soulmates, theirs was a love story written across the rugged landscape of the American West, a testament to courage, second chances, and the enduring power of a heart set free.